Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this fine world. You're listening to the Startup Selling Show, talking sales with Scott Douchey. That's me. Today's episode is a guest episode, and today's guest is Jonathan Soares. Currently, Jonathan is the founder and CEO of Agency Labs, and before Agency Labs, Jonathan has been a multi-time entrepreneur and startup founder, which is one of the main reasons I wanted to have Jonathan here on the show. His first company is a company that is called Q Products, is a CPG company, which means consumer packaged goods company, which he started while he was in college. He started with $10,000 of his own money and was able to launch a company, a sauce like barbecue sauces and marinades, which eventually got into 15,000 retail and mass merchandising locations, including Walmart, Kroger, Publix, Food Lion, Safeway, some of the biggest, the biggest food distributors and shopping places for food. You guys know what I'm saying, all over the world. And so the reason I wanted to have Jonathan on the podcast was not just to talk about his success founding and launching and growing companies. I wanted to talk with Jonathan about his approach to sales and how he thinks about sales as a company founder and how he thinks about sales in his conversations and in his relationships with his future customers and his current customers. So some of the main topics that we talked about today in the episode with Jonathan was looking at this concept of collaboration versus competition. Now, one of the main things that most of us see out there whenever we're going out and selling our stuff is that, of course, we see competition, whether it's direct competitors or indirect competitors. You know, this idea of buy versus build within a company that might be looking for a new solution, or a competitor that might do some of what we do, but not all of what we do. And so it can be very, very easy for us to dive into a sales conversation thinking about competition as the only way to win the deal. And one of the key ways that Jonathan has been able to grow and expand his companies is thinking about not just competing with the other companies in his space, but thinking about how to collaborate with them, thinking about it as an and versus or mentality, and how to strategically sell with your thinking of them as collaborators as opposed to competitors in a way that allows you to more quickly grow sales, but also allows you to grow space and process in your target companies so that they can figure out ways to fit you in as opposed to thinking about how they have to take something out in order to use your product or service. So this idea of collaboration versus competition. The second thing that we talked about, or one of the other topics that we talked about quite a bit, was this idea of being honest and compassionate with your prospects, which sounds not, obviously you want to be honest about your price, about what your product does. When we're talking about honest and compassionate here, it's really empathizing with the person on the other side of the table. What is their motivation? What are the outcomes that they want to achieve? And when we're honest about what our current status is as a company, as a product, the problems that we solve, and if we can be compassionate about what that other person wants and needs, what it does is create a collaborative environment in the sales process, as opposed to this idea of what people think of traditionally as a sales environment, where I have to sell something and convince somebody that they should use my product or use my service. But instead, you can think about it as a way to collaborate and partner with the other person so that you are mutually getting to the outcomes that you want. And Jonathan dove into a really great example of how he did this early on with his CPG company, on how he was able to get some shelf space in a food retailer that otherwise would have been very, very, if not impossible to get. So listen for that case study, because I think you'll really, really enjoy it. And I think you'll be able to think about how you can apply that same principle of honesty and compassion to your sales process in your company. And then the third key topic that we talked about, this idea of vision versus purpose. Vision versus purpose. So vision meaning like this is the long-term vision of where I want to take my company in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. And then bringing that vision back down and understanding what is the purpose of why we're doing what we do every single day. And Jonathan talked a lot about making sure that he is always balancing the vision of where he wants to go with where he is right now and what he needs to do on a day-to-day basis with him and his team and his customers. So I think you're really, really going to enjoy this conversation with Jonathan, and that Jonathan and I just had. He's a really human kind of person, which it sounds odd to say because of course he's human. But when you look at a lot of times at founders, if you see their LinkedIn profile or you see them on TV, done some TV spots, and you say like, wow, okay, that person is, this really great entrepreneur. I wonder how they do it. They must have some kind of machine behind them. And while most people do have a machine or they do have a process, a lot of what comes through in my conversation with Jonathan and in his approach to growing and managing his companies is a much more human approach, and how he manages his team and how he manages his conversations with his prospective and current customers. So that's one of the main reasons I wanted to have Jonathan on the program here. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And so without any further ado, let's head over to my conversation with Jonathan Soares. Jonathan, hey, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I've already done, a bit of an intro, told people about you and about what we're going to be talking about today. I, as always, love to hear directly from our guests when people ask you, like, hey, Jonathan, what do you do? What exactly do you say? How do you describe for people what you do and how you do it?
Well, usually I start off saying I have fun every day and love what I do. And I kind of segue into everyone's asked, well, what does that mean? That's, I like building things and I love technology. So I run a technology production studio called Agency Labs. And we support in-house and traditional agencies of all sizes, building custom websites, mobile apps, software, typically on a project basis. So we're their go-to engineering partner. We work with a number of brands and agencies across the United States, and they're mostly large global brands and Fortune 500s.
Got it. And so to have fun every day. So I think, I don't know you very well, but I do think I can in some ways see that, because there's something I got to ask you. You probably get asked this all the time. You're probably sick of talking about it. But I saw a spot on Fox Business.
Oh God.
From years ago.
Yeah.
And you had a business where you were
30
selling.
pounds ago.
That was you 30 pounds ago. Well,
yeah, 30 pounds ago.
You were on Fox Business News around your products. You run a company previously called Q Products, which was barbecue sauce and other sauces, right?
Yep.
Do you mind if I just ask you a question or two about that? Because I saw, I was doing research for the show here, and I was like doing the research, and I was like, Fox Business, what is this? And I see this interview with you, and it was it Bulls and Bears?
Yeah.
What was the show?
Cody Willard. Usually I get asked, how'd you go from sauce to software? That usually strikes up.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. But dude, you killed it in that interview. You looked very natural and very calm. Were you nervous, like knowing you're on Fox Business?
I think the juices were in overdrive during that. I kind of just jumped right in. And when you're selling and so used to selling your pitch and selling yourself and selling your products over and over and over again, it just comes second nature. So I just went in and was myself and had a great time just sharing my story and what we had going on.
Yeah, you had a very, I would say, like, you were effusive and enthusiastic, but you looked very controlled. And maybe it's from the practice. And that's, I guess, a little bit of what I wanted to talk to you about, because it seems like even at that age, you were 21 when you did that interview?
Yep.
And so you're 21 years old, you're running this product company, you've got a sauce that's in 1,000 stores. From the interview, I remember you saying, like, they were asking you, like, how do you get into 1,000 stores? And you keep following up with people. You keep going, you keep going, you keep calling, you keep updating them.
Yeah.
Like, where do you feel like that comes from?
So my tenacity, a lot of that is just kind of innate. I'm very passionate about things that I love. And if it's something that I'm passionate about, I want to share that with people. I've combined that with a skill that I've kind of gained from my dad. My dad was a sales manager for GE for 36 years. And I saw him sell, massive power plants, parts and energies, type services for all the turbines and jazz. And I saw how he nurtured his clients. I saw how he built relationships. I heard, and saw how he, articulated a lot of his points and built those relationships. And seeing that over and over again. And my dad would talk to me about all of the clients he was working with, the deals he was closing, how he was closing them since I was, an early teenager. And that was like psychologically embedding in my head how to treat people, how to talk to them, how to build relationships, how to sell a way that makes me feel comfortable. I think that combined with, my personality and my passion was a great combination that generated a lot of success when I was doing that business and also, this business that I'm doing today. So the one key defining thing is honesty and compassion. And I think that when you're honest and compassionate with people, it makes the sales process that much more efficient, and it makes selling that much more fun because you get to see people, genuinely treat you because you're treating them how they want to be treated.
So those are two really big words that, we talk about in sales, about building trust and relationships and those kinds of things. Why those two words? Like, why honesty and why compassion? And how do you feel like that helps you and would help other founders who might feel like, oh, I've got to put on a mask or I've got to act a certain way in order to get this deal done? Those are two big words. So any particular reason why you chose honesty and compassion?
So I chose those because they're not actively practiced or widely practiced. And I think in the greater sales community, I think there's such a focus on closing and hitting numbers and hitting metrics and hitting your quota that a lot of the core, more kind of personal or interpersonal relationship building qualities and characteristics that salespeople should first and foremost build, I think are often, poo-pooed, to the side. Where me, it was really more about building those characteristics and being my truest self that allowed me to be most confident when I was selling and allowed people to really relate to me and, made the sales process that much more efficient. I use that because I don't see it used a lot. And I think that's a shame on like the emerging salespeople today that are literally jumping in out of college, trying to hit quotas no matter which industry they're in. And they're not really being taught a lot of these core values and core characteristics to make them good salespeople.
I got to ask you, use the word efficient. So a lot of times people don't think about taking the personal route or the relationship route or being honest or compassionate, being more efficient. How is that being more efficient if it takes a longer period of time, or at least perceived to take a longer period of time?
Sure. So, you can spend a lot of time trying to bang down a door and get in front of a prospect, getting into your previous point about like tenacity and how do you get in front of all these people. And I think genuineness resonates and it creates a more efficient sales process because people can read you more efficiently and more effectively, as opposed to not knowing who you are and really needing either a warm intro or to continually, try and break down the barrier of getting in front of that prospect. The great thing now is that there's social media and a lot of platforms that will bring your true self to your potential target market. And I think a lot of people are leveraging that and using that. And I think leveraging that, people building up that trust inherently or indirectly allows that sales process to be a more effective process, as opposed to in the past where, you're literally cold calling someone and hoping that your script that that you put together is going to come across as genuine. There's different approaches you can do now that, by taking a more compassionate and empathetic approach and putting yourself out there, that people are going to want to work with you. And that's going to make your overall process that much more effective.
Yeah. So first of all, I absolutely love this. Like this, you and I are sort of for prep, we're talking about like taking a more human approach to sales. And I really want to dig into this because I think it's so crucial, because a lot of people listening to this show are founders of companies, especially running startups. And there's this pressure to hit the numbers on a spreadsheet. You're trying to raise capital. You're trying to, hit your burn rate. And, we see this all the time with like, founders that come to us and go, hey, here's my sales funnel, right? I'm sending out these 1,000 emails. This is my 4 email sequence that I'm sending out. These are my conversion rates. I'm sending 1,000 emails. I'm booking 3 demos. How do I increase my conversion rate? And it's like, well, does it really matter if we get from 3 demos to 5 demos? Is that really what we're trying to do here? Or is there something much deeper around the problem that you're trying to solve and the people you're trying to serve? And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, maybe like with an example from like the Q products even. Like here you are trying to call thousands of stores, get in thousands of stores, which is just raw, like tenacity. Mm-hmm. But you could do raw tenacity and raw numbers, but not get to the human side, not be honest, not be compassionate with people. So like, what are some mindset frameworks that you use to make sure you're balancing the pure tenacity and hitting the numbers with making sure that people are clear that there's a human on the other side here?
Sure. So I'll share both experiences. One, selling a product, selling a service, share a story, and then hopefully come full circle in answering.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Now I don't have to do anything. I'll just sit back and listen. I'm ready.
If I get like too long-winded, just like wave at me or wink or something.
No, you're good, man. We're all here listening.
So my whole philosophy with Q products started after having countless discussions with advisors in the CPG space, understanding how to take products to market, because my goal was to be a national brand. And at the height, we were in almost 15,000 stores across the US. And a lot of the folks that I spoke to kind of said that, hey, if you're a natural specialty organic brand, you kind of have to start in the specialty trade, which I did to some degree. But I didn't want to be, walking into 1,000 supermarkets one by one. I saw that the larger big box stores wanted to, really embrace the natural organic category. So my philosophy was I'd rather spend my time going after a Walmart or a Kroger than going after, 500 independents. At the end of the day, it was almost the identical amount of time that I would have spent. But I saw that as going big or going home as my approach that was going to work for me. And I loved, the headquarter call at the large supermarket chain. It fueled me. It drove me. It gave me a lot of validation. I mean, I'm a Leo, and having that affirmation that's saying, hey, look, I'm sitting in front of the national grocery buyer for Safeway or for Walmart or for Kroger or for Food Line, whoever, like that to me was like gasoline that lit my fire immensely. So that on that side, like going big, going home, that worked for me. It was a very smart sales approach. I think a lot of times, a lot of folks that are selling products are oftentimes limited to the kind of pounding the pavement, door to door type of, selling vacuum type of approach where, every organization is different. But if there's a way that you can think strategically as a salesperson and look at ways that, you can put deals together, look at more strategic partnerships that you can do. If you own a software as a service company, and you're selling seat by seat, that's great. But is there a way that you can, leverage the platform that you're building to go through larger organizations and see if you can secure a trial of 100 seats or 250 seats that could open you up to 10,000 seats? And everyone's like, well, that's an enterprise sales. It's totally different. But I would argue that the amount of time, energy, and money that you're spending trying to get, individual users, if your product is that great and you have the ability to support that, there are larger deals at play that are going to make that sales cycle more efficiently. So segueing that into the service business, we support agencies. That's how it started. I mean, from the Edelmans and Havas's of the world to your more, emerging boutique shops. My philosophy on that came from just understanding my market. I could have started a traditional agency and said, all right, I'm going to compete against everyone for business. And there's 30 or 40,000 agencies in the United States, or I can collaborate with them. And logically to me, I said, all right, if I collaborate with them, and I work with one agency, that one agency might do $500,000 worth of digital work or $1 million worth of digital work. That could be 3, 5, 10 websites, microsites, applications. All of a sudden, I land 10 agency accounts. I've got my development team jam-packed with all different kinds of projects. So going against the grain and developing a non-traditional model was, again, kind of my approach to kind of going big and really rolling the dice on my theory, instead of me kind of literally fighting tooth and nail to get the next website in to keep my team busy. So that, was in part trying to understand the model from a broader perspective and really looking at ways to strategically sell and have my clients and customers sell for me, or me help them to sell to further kind of increase, their business and our business. So it's created this cool ecosystem where, we're delivering on time and on budget for these agencies. They're extremely happy. Their clients are ecstatic. They're getting more work, and it just goes full circle, and and the engine kind of keeps running. So there's ways on both sides of the world that, if you think strategically, depending on how you're selling and where you're selling, it can really, work to your advantage. So talking quickly about like being a founder and selling and trying to meet those numbers, my goal for the first 4 years of the business, I was literally pounding the pavement. I was the only salesperson here hustling, trying to, get in front of as many of these agencies as possible. Well, like any founder, I have to wear the sales hat, the operations hat, the finance hat. And it got to a point where my model was proven enough that we started getting a lot of repeat business. And I was able to start scaling back the time I was spending on sales to start working less in the business and more on the business. And then I started to reinvest in the business by adding and expanding the team and building out like the sales team to take my approach to sales and put that on hyperdrive. I still actively sell, but it's gotten to the point where I know that I'm most effective where I'm not in it stressing about the next deal that I have to close, where I can see things kind of from a higher level and look strategically to how we're going to build and scale that business. There was a situation with my last company, not to kind of bounce back and forth, where it was probably my third month in business. And one thing about the consumer product space is that everyone told me, like, look, Jonathan, like, you're never going to make it. You're going against Kraft and P&G and Unilever to launch a brand. It's going to take you millions of dollars and years upon years to scale it. I started the company with 10 grand, and I pretty much had all these people against me, kind of, fueling my passion to prove them wrong. It was my sheer will and stubbornness and using that as ammunition to say, you know what, screw it. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do exactly what they think that I can't do and prove them wrong. I had met with a distributor and I wanted to get into Stop and Shop. And they had told me that, look, no one gets into Stop and Shop for free. Good luck. It's going to take you years to get in. I said, all right, well, get me a meeting and, we'll go from there. So I went up to Boston, met with the buyer, with this distributor rep. And this was to get into several hundreds of their stores up and down the Northeast. So I met with the buyer. We were going through like my pitch, my vision for the brand. And at the end of the meeting, he said, well, what do you have for slotting dollars and, marketing allowances and whatnot? I said, honestly, I have nothing. I said, my goal is to, when I gave him kind of a marketing plan, what I was going to do with kind of early social media at the time that no one knew was social media, how I was using MySpace to promote the brand and radio advertising. I mean, the shit that I was coming up with back then was like, I look back now, I was like, wow, I was kind of like ahead of my time. And the buyer was like, oh, this seems kind of interesting and new, and combine that with like in-store samplings and stuff. I said, look, the only way for me to do that is for me to use, the profit from, your order to kind of funnel back into marketing. If you just want me to give you free product to put on your shelf, I mean, I'm at a disadvantage. You're probably going to kick me out of your store in 6 to 12 months. So he said, okay, I respect that. I'll get back to you. And we left the meeting, and that distributor said to me, he goes, Jonathan, he goes, don't get your hopes up. He goes, I don't think that you're going to get in. I said, okay, fine. So 2 months goes by, and I'm in a Stop and Shop, and I'm literally walking up and down the aisle, haven't heard anything. And I'm thinking to myself, kind of like a prayer in the back of my mind. I'm like, God, if this is meant to be, just give me a sign, like anything. Just something that I know that because I need to get a win. And literally within 30 seconds, I get a phone call from this distributor. He said, hey, Jonathan, have you gotten our email about our order? And I'm like, order for what? He goes, you got to Stop and Shop. And I was like, shut the fuck up. I was like, no way. He goes, no. He goes, you got in. He goes, we've been trying it. We emailed you. You never responded back, but we've got a purchase order for, I don't know what it was. It was like a $25,000 or $50,000 initial order. And I was just like mind blown. And that to me was like the affirmation that I was on the right path. So sometimes as a founder, no matter how hard you're spinning your wheels, it takes one of those moments where it's the realization that what you're doing is actually what you're supposed to be doing. And it oftentimes comes when you're grinding and your head's down and you just got to keep at it. And you will get that validation if it's something that's truly meant to be.
All right. We are off and running in my conversation with Jonathan Soares. We're going to take a quick moment to share some really, really big news, something that I'm really proud of and something I think you're going to be really excited about. And that news is that I have just published a new book. And that book, if you're a startup founder, a startup team, if you're in that situation where you're trying to get out of the garage and get out of this hustle phase and into the scale phase, I think you're really, really going to like it. And in fact, the name of the book is called Stop Hustling, Start Scaling, How to Ramp Up Your B2B Startups Repeatable Revenue with the Q Framework. Stop hustling and start scaling. So that tells you everything you need to know about the book. It's a book that took me several years to put together with the publisher, lots of writing and rewriting and rewriting. I went through multiple drafts of this book in order to push this out and get it out to you in the very best form that I could over the course of the last 3.5 years. So the book itself, you'll see it follows what I call the Q framework. Once you go over to Amazon, you can check out the table of contents and read more about that and the preface of the book. But most importantly, at the end of every single chapter, there's a series of very specific exercises where you can head over to my company website, salesqualia.com, and you'll be able to download worksheets and playbooks and how-to guides, videos on how to use those worksheets and playbooks that are included and mentioned in the book. So it's not just a book where you crack it open and you read it and you go, oh, that was a good read. It's a book where you're going to be able to go through every single chapter. And at the end of each chapter, there's a really specific exercise that you can take as an action you can take with your sales pipeline, with your sales process for your company, and start to apply what you're reading to your company right away. So really, really excited for the book, the way it came together. It evolved over the course of the last 3.5 years to come to its final form that's now published. And I would love it if you could grab a copy and go over to the best place to go is Amazon.com and just search Stop Hustling, Start Scaling, or you can just search my last name, Sam Douchey. And either way, you'll be able to find a copy of the book right now, as the time of this recording. It's available for a simple $1.99 on Kindle. And we're also working on the hard copy, getting the hard copy available in the next couple of weeks as well. Maybe by the time you listen to this podcast, you'll find that the hard copy is available. So head over to Amazon, check out Stop Hustling, Start Scaling, grab a copy of the book. And most importantly, don't just read it, actually apply the stuff that I'm sharing with you in that book. So, all right, that's it for the commercial. Let's head back to my conversation with Jonathan Soares.
Man, this is a great story, and I want to unpack that because there's a lot of levels here that I want to dive into that, whether it's barbecue sauce or software, there's a couple things going all the way back to your idea of being honest and compassionate with people. So you're selling at the time, right? You're selling organic barbecue sauce. So it's kind of a new product and a new market, right? Everybody's used to like barbecue sauce, it's Kraft and all these other major brands, barbecue sauce. Like even organic itself is still relatively new back then, right?
99 cents.
So, and even then it was like
$5.99. It was like huge.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, okay. And when you think about organic, it's like, okay, you're talking about tomatoes and kale, and you're not talking about barbecue sauce back then. Because now you can go to Trader Joe's and there's organic ketchup, right? It's just organic. Everything. It's just like a given that there's an organic version of it. But back then, there's a huge chasm, and especially for a CPG, a consumer packaged good product, it's just like, it is a new thing. And so like walking into that buyer, and if you would have gone in there trying to sell the way that everyone else is selling, then you didn't have the money, you didn't have the dollars, you didn't have any way to actually make that happen.
Yeah.
And so to me, like the resourcefulness to think about it in a new way, it's like, it's a new product in a new market. I'm going to sell it in a new way. And you're just very open and honest with this guy and say, look, man, like this is the deal.
Yeah.
Like if we're going to make this successful, we're going to have to partner on this. And if the partnership works, like you're going to have this product that nobody else has. And so it really forced that buyer, without being there, I can imagine it forced that buyer to go, I never thought about it that way, right? Like advertising barbecue sauce on MySpace. This guy seems like, all right, maybe we take a flyer on this guy.
Yeah.
But it was all about you being honest in the beginning and understanding like his point of view. Like even like when you were telling the story, it was like, look, even if we do those things, you're going to kick me out of the store in 6 months. Like that was just like saying like, I get your situation. I get that if we're not successful, you're not going to keep carrying a product that's not making money for you.
Sure.
So just being upfront about what was possible and being empathetic on that person's side of it. I think that's what built that credibility that they go, all right, let's give a chance. Let's give this guy a chance. And I think, whether it's software or barbecue sauce, like we're selling software into a big company like General Electric or Walmart, like here's the deal, man. Like if we're going to sell this is how it's going to go. This is the only way that PO is going to help us pay for the people that are going to come implement. So no, I don't have 20 engineers ready to go, but if you write us a check, we will.
Yeah. And that's transcended across this industry and business too. I mean, there were times in the early days where, you're negotiating payment terms, and some of our clients are like in-house agencies. And I've talked to so many agencies who are like, we're stuck with like 90-day terms with this client. And I say to myself, it's like, honesty in that regard has always boded well for me. And I've been honest with a lot of these clients. Say, look, we're a small, at the time, growing company. The difference between a 30-day payment term cycle and 90 days is huge in terms of cash flow. And if you want the caliber of talent and the caliber of service, that comes with, with certain stipulations. And for us, like being able to, not worrying about, when certain payment cycles are going to hit. I mean, that's big for a small business where we see a lot of our agencies, it's very much keeping up with appearances, and they'll agree to terms because they think that it'll look poorly upon them that, that they want to negotiate when they're going to get paid. And that to me is kind of baffling. It's like, all of the glitz and the glamour and the fancy offices and all that, at the end of the day, you have to think first and foremost, like what's the best for your business. And I've always thought about that. It's allowed me to have tough conversations by taking ego out of it and just being brutally honest. And people respect that, and it works.
It does. And, even if their policy is like, well, we just pay all vendors 90 days. Okay. Can you just think of maybe one instance where you didn't?
Yeah.
Like flat out asking that vendor management person, like, have you ever not paid 90 days? Have you ever paid anybody in 30 days? Have you ever prepaid for a discount? And they go, well, actually, yeah, we have. Okay. Could we just talk about that situation to see if there's anything there that would relate to our situation here? Because if you can pay us 30 days or pay us some amount up front, here's all the extra stuff that you're going to get. We're going to be able to deliver all of this value that otherwise is going to be unavailable to you. So would you rather have the value that we can create, or would you rather save, 1% per month in, paying us in 90 days versus, right away?
Sure.
And when people make the decision to buy from you, they want the value that you're going to create far more than they want the money. That's why they're paying you. They'd rather give up the money and get the value. So if you've already established that that's what's going to happen here, then why not just continue to lever on top of that proposition that you've already made?
Exactly. But you're always selling. You're selling your terms. You're selling your product. You're selling yourself. As a founder, there's always something that you have to be selling or negotiating. So being able to be honest and take the emotion out of those types of situations, I mean, it's great practice over and over and over again. And I'm a big proponent of having real kind of human conversations because there's always another person at the other end of the line. And people want to relate to people that they can understand and respect. And that goes a long way.
Yeah. So there's a couple other things you mentioned in what you were sharing there, Jonathan, I want to dig into too. One of them, you talked about collaboration versus competition. So in your world now, like you could choose to compete with agencies or work with agencies. And I think like the mindset, I think too often a lot of companies come in with, especially, startups or growing companies, it's like, well, we got to take market share or we got to get into that market space, or well, IBM is already selling that, or Salesforce already has an app. And chances are you don't necessarily have to take away market share and get people to stop using something else. It can be an and. It doesn't have to be use the Salesforce app or our thing. It could be use the Salesforce app and use our thing because that app doesn't do certain things that we do. And it's an opportunity to think more broadly. You don't have to compete with Salesforce. What if you could find a way to cooperate with them or collaborate with them that's going to open up every app user on that Salesforce platform now could be a potential customer instead of looking at Salesforce as a potential competitor.
You know what drives that though? It's this like perception of I want to be a unicorn. I got to go big in terms of like the product I'm building. I have to be building game-changing software. And if you look at the data, I mean, most companies that fail are the ones that they went too big and they didn't have the infrastructure to really support that growth. Or there's a lot of ones that never got to play ball, but they had the ambitions of grandeur. Which, I mean, when I look at like software and building software and being strategic about that, I mean, sometimes the first base hit, I mean, is a huge freaking win. And if you keep hitting, doubles, eventually, you're gonna get a run. And a lot of times people are just looking at, I want to be a unicorn. I want $1 billion valuation. I've got to do this, and that. I mean, that only happens a fraction of the time. And a lot of people are shortchanging their product or platform because they're trying to go too big rather than being strategic and building something that, isn't going to be completely reliant on venture funding where, they can scale to a point and get traction and start, funding itself and then put that founder and that team in more leverage to raise more strategic capital to really take it and scale it to the next level. But people don't think that way. There's a lot of young entrepreneurs, even middle-aged entrepreneurs that are looking for that grand slam. And how many times do they have to, swing for that fence before they realize that hey, is it really worth it every single time? Or is there a different way? That goes to your point about, how you can think differently about selling or positioning a product. I think a lot of it is the industry that's pushing people towards, grandeur, and it's a really disservice to, emerging founders.
Yeah, I was just on an onboarding call yesterday with a new client, and they've got a software application that's being used, and they've got a bunch of old legacy customers. They're moving over to a new platform, launching new products. There's like lots of really exciting stuff happening. And we started talking about price points, and their price points are actually pretty low relative to the time of the sale. So they're like going through 6-month sales cycles to get a $10,000, $20,000 deal. And I'm like, there's some incongruence there. If I'm going to spend 6 months with somebody, you probably should charge a lot more because of the amount of time and effort to get $10K or $20K, or just figure out a way to reduce the sales time. And they said, well, the real play here is we want to if we get enough of these customers together, then we're going to have this platform and a marketplace, and then it's really going to explode by 5 or 10X. And so as we started like partitioning out and parsing out the strategy, what we realized is like the marketplace should be the bonus. Like if we can set up the company to be profitable, to run, to grow, just selling upgrading the legacy people, selling this new product.
The whole profit thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like just nail that. And even if that takes 3 years or 5, however long, maybe it takes a year, right? Maybe you can upgrade however many customers you have right away. It goes really fast. Maybe it takes a long time. But if you're saying like, well, we're going to make deals, we're going to reduce our price even more, or we're willing to tolerate long sales cycles, we're willing to tolerate indecision for the promise of something down the road, which may or may not work. The market could shift in 3 years, and the marketplace opportunity could be completely gone. If instead we just focus on now, worry about later, like let's just nail this in the next 12 to 18 months. Then if that marketplace opportunity is there, it's going to be so much easier to really blow this thing out. And as we built this out, they're like, you know what, you're right. Let's just do that for the next 6 to 12 months. Let's just focus on that and then treat the marketplace as the bonus. And sometimes it's just you start the company. You probably did this with any of the companies you started. Like, hey, I see a huge opportunity here. I want to make a big impact. And it's tough to straddle the vision that you've got for the $1 billion, more size marketplace with, like, what I got to do today, this month, this quarter to make sure that I'm building the foundation that gets us there.
Yeah. My favorite quote is never let your vision overshadow your purpose. And it's something that I've always kind of held in the back of my mind, because as entrepreneurs, we all have like ADHD to some degree. And it's like that shiny object syndrome. We're always looking at, what's going to motivate us, or what that shiny object is that's going to be the flavor of that specific week. And as I've grown older and more and matured, I've steered away from that and focused on who I am here and now and where I want my company to be and what my purpose really is. And that's helped me to really ground me, not only when I'm selling, but, even just, regular business decisions. It's steering away from all the bullshit that you hear, that you get distracted by, and just focusing on, what really matters. I think a lot of founders, it's so easy to get tied into this whole world, and especially when you're, focused on raising money and you're trying to appease investors. Your situation that you just described is perfect. Imagine being a founder that has to go out because he thinks he has to raise $50 million for a software product for a Series B because he has to hire 200 people. We build software every day. There's software applications that we can knock out in maybe 3 or 4 months that might cost a client, 50 to 100 grand, hypothetically, MVP. I'm thinking to myself, okay, you have 2 developers that can knock it out. You build it out, then you go out and you scale it, or you get some initial users on the platform to build up proof concept. Then when you have validation, you can use that and further scale it. But, you have the option of going out and raising additional capital to really put it into overdrive. But when you look at the scale that a lot of these companies are running, a lot of it is just a way for investors to funnel money into companies and justify hiring and growth as a way to substantiate, expenses to further, have to raise more money. And it becomes this like vicious cycle that you're stuck on that teat. And again, it's such a disservice to entrepreneurs because they have this vision of grandeur that's pushed on by the investment community, because they have to grow, they have to scale, they have to show big exits. And it's so disingenuous to what they should be doing. And to your point, it's building a profitable business. Build build the foundation, scale it strategically, and then, it puts more control in the founder's hands. Otherwise, you hear all these stories about founders getting kicked off as CEO and all that jazz. And you know what? If you've raised, $150, $200 million and you're left with 5% of your company, you fucking deserve it. It's plain as that. You had no problem taking that money the entire time and giving everyone as much control when you don't perform or when the business doesn't perform. And granted, there are circumstances when, people get screwed over. Happens all the time. But my dad always told me, you make your bed, you sleep in it. And you have to be, cognizant of every decision that you make as you're scaling your business. So that's my little rant on that, which is a little off topic, but sorry.
No, I love the vision versus purpose, because the vision is like, where do you want to go? What's the impact you can make in your marketplace? The purpose is like the today, like why I've got this client today, I'm meeting with a current customer. What do they need? How do I make things even better? How do I can show them even more value than what they're getting right now? Or I've got a prospective client in front of me. How do I be honest? And how do I help them understand, like, these are all the things that are going to have to happen if we're going to work together? Yeah. That's like the purpose of like that person in front of you being present in that moment, saying like, this one customer is the next one. And that's the one that matters the most, because you can't get 100 more until you get one more. That's just the way math works. And Absolutely. That actually leads me to the third point of your story, which was this idea of like you were grinding it out 4 years doing sales. And you said you got to the point where you're getting some repeat business where you could take your foot off a little bit or focus on partnerships. And that's where like being deliberate about delivering on purpose to your customers enables you to get the repeat business. Because we see this, you see this with software companies all the time. Well, what's my churn rate? Well, maybe a better question to ask is not what is your churn rate, is why do you have a churn rate?
Yeah.
That's the question to ask, because maybe you have a churn rate because you got the wrong customers in the first place and you sold them something that you shouldn't have because you had this pressure. Or maybe there's something wrong with your product, or maybe there's something wrong with your service, or maybe there's something wrong with your price. And so if you to bring it back to, instead of like, got to get all these clients on the platform, customers on the platform, because that's the vision. Well, the purpose is like, well, this customer, is it the right one for a product? And what happens if they do churn? Why do I have churn versus what is it?
Yeah. A lot of times, like, you have your churn rate because you're churning through potential customers and they're kind of churning through you. They're looking for the best price, the best deal, and there's no relationship. In the moment there's a need, you sell them on the need, they onboard, you lose touch, and you're on to the next. It's not always, about, the kind of volume of selling. It's more so about like how you're maintaining those relationships. But when you're, building out, let's say, a software platform or even like a regular company that's non-technical, and you have a high volume of clients, thinking about how you're going to maintain those relationships through touch points is so important than just kind of constantly rolling over and, figuring out how you're going to meet your quota. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels. I never understood that. And all the clients that we have, like, I'm very active in building relationships with them. And even if it's just liking something that they share on Facebook or LinkedIn, or shooting them a comment like, hey, what's going on? Or being a part of like a mutual group that, I might share some perspective on a certain topic. There's ways to be engaged where you're not constantly like, shooting them an email saying, hey, how are you doing? But you have to think about that. I never got that. I don't understand why organizations are just so priding, their employees on the volume at which their outreach needs to be maintained at, as opposed to really nurturing those accounts, leveraging those accounts to open more accounts and really maximizing them. Because most salespeople are working on a surface level. They're not really diving deep and figuring out that if we're delivering a good service, how happy that client would be to potentially refer me to 10 others. You got 1,000, that's 1,000, potential prospects that you could tap into if you really work your network.
So I'm going to try to do some practical takeaways here. So if I'm a startup founder listening to this and going, okay, I know there's all this pressure. I want to put purpose over vision. I want to think and versus or. I want to do all this stuff that we're talking about. But I feel like I'm in this vortex right now of investor meetings and growth and, burn rates and churn and all that kind of stuff. What are a couple of really specific practical tips that if you had somebody like that sitting in front of you, like, help me, man, help me. I need you, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Like, what would be a couple of first steps that you'd recommend to somebody to help step away from the vortex of spreadsheets and growth goals and get back to being more human, being more honest, being more compassionate?
I mean, once you're in the kind of capital raise mode, it never ends. You're always raising money, which is why I didn't raise money for this business or my last. My last was a much different situation, but this one, I'm the sole owner, founder, and I didn't want to be constantly out there, trying to find investors or building that. I want to be laser focused on building my business. I mean, that's not always the case for every founder. So understanding kind of what your growth plan is going to really dictate the decisions that you're going to make. So if you know that you're going to have to raise capital to sustain the business, you're going to have to build out an infrastructure to support it. That infrastructure starts with you as a founder. So I would always advise that the first person that should be selling is the founder, to figure out what works and what doesn't work. If that founder, is wildly introverted and not a salesperson at all, which, to be honest, people respect that. You don't have to be like wild and dynamic and flamboyant to be a great salesperson. You got to be your fucking self. That's it. Just talk. Yeah. People want to work with people that they, want to relate to, that they like. I mean, that's selling. But people think that, they have to put on this appearance to actually sell. Like it's like a dirty thing. So I would kind of challenge a founder that, step out of your comfort zone, just have conversations of why you built your product or service, and why they should work with you. I mean, I've been in meetings where there's literally been a founder CEO who sat there, awkwardly while some like VP of business development did a pitch, and it was the worst freaking pitch in the world. Because here's this person that was, doing all the hand movements and talking about this and that, and like I could tell that the customer just wanted to hear from the founder. Just talk to me, dude. And I wanted to shake him, be like, you're missing it. So I would probably kind of challenge someone to look inward and see what they could do themselves. And then once they've kind of explored that path and realize whether they think they can or can't do it, then take those learnings and look to build out a preliminary organization. You don't have to go out and hire, super senior sales team out of the gate. You can work with, consulting firm that's going to help you put that in place if you're not as well versed. I'm a firm believer of, finding specialists that fill gaps. There's things that I know that I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend that I know them. So I'm going to either hire for them or, strategically, bring them in to help me, scale most effectively. If they do decide to build out, a small sales team, I would say start small and try a lot of different tactics. Not everything's going to work, but, make little bets, try out, social advertising, try out, video marketing, try radio advertising, maybe TV advertising might work for you. Who the hell knows? But a lot of it is just planting little seeds and seeing what grows from it. And then once you find like what your niche is and what actually works, then dump a buttload of money into it and then just literally kind of keep driving from there, and then using that as a launch pad for whatever else you're building. That'd be like the initial advice I'd probably give someone.
Yeah, I particularly like the idea of like founder selling, like always be selling, even whether it's whatever growth you're in. If you're in truly in startup mode, you should be the selling person, right? You're the only person that's going to be able to really explain why you're out there to solve this problem and what the product does, and you don't usually have the money to hire someone anyway. And then secondly, this idea of being yourself. Like I've been around plenty of very successful enterprise salespeople, and they are just very introverted people. There was a guy when I used to sell college textbooks for Prentice Hall, Pearson Education, back in the late 80s, early 90s. And there was a guy who covered all of the Ivy League schools, and Harvard, Yale, all those guys. And every year he was up on stage as a top performer, and like you try to talk to this guy, and it just seemed like he couldn't even complete. It didn't seem like he could ever complete a sentence. He never liked being at the big sales meetings. He never liked being in that social situation. But when it came down to talking to professors about principles of economics or organic chemistry, he just that was his thing. And he was the best in the company at doing it year after year for 20 years. He was always up on stage. And I think embracing, if you feel like you're awkward, just embrace that.
100%.
So listen, I'm not a great, just so you know, I don't even like having these conversations because I don't like selling. I just want to talk to you about the problem why I started this company and why I think this problem needs to be solved.
People eat that up. 100%.
They would 100% eat it up. And then if you have a sales team and you've got like an SDR that's helping you book meetings, have your SDR go, listen, I'm going to get you talking to Jonathan. He's our CEO. Listen, I'm just going to let you know when you guys get on the phone, he's like a little awkward. Sometimes he might ask you weird questions. It's just him being him. Just go with it. You set it up. So like you got the mad scientist coming into the room, and it's all about positioning. And that way you're not feeling like, as a founder that is uncomfortable or introverted, you got to walk in with a tight blue suit and give people the gun and do the hand waving, all that stuff. You're like, no, man, like I just want to solve this problem for people. And I think you have the problem. Can we just talk about that?
100%. Yeah. One thing that, that's a counter to that is the stereotypical like douchey founder. It's like, that's like the hardest thing for a salesperson, where they've got a great product, but their founder can't get their ego out of the equation. So it's like you have an SDR that comes in, sells it, tees it up, and then the founder just thinks he's, this big swinging guy in the room. And the person's like, man, we had it until that happened. So it really depends.
I'm really glad we're having this meeting because I'm here to tell you how you're doing it all wrong. I've been in those meetings, not as a founder.
And a lot of that, it's coaching those individuals and kind of breaking them down from the pedestal and saying, hey, there's a different way to communicate to people. Or there's like the asshole who's like, has some mental kind of whatever. And it's like, there's no getting around, talking to them or figuring out like who they are. So those are like the little outliers of the case. But for the most part, going through like what we just talked about, I think any founder is going to win, hands down.
Yeah, the good news, I don't think we have any of those people listening to the show. So we'll just assume that we all together can laugh at those people like, oh, I know a guy like that. I know a woman like that. We're just going to ignore them. Well, dude, Jonathan, this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I appreciate you sharing your insight and your perspective, everything from, 21 years old on Fox News, selling barbecue sauce, up to solving problems for Fortune 500s with your agency today. If people just want to reach out and get some more advice, or they want to learn more about what you do every day with your company, maybe they just want to know how they can have fun every day the way you have fun every day, where's the best place for them to get in touch? Where should they go?
I'm very active on social, so hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter. They can also email me, jonathan@agencylabs.com. I always respond and always love, paying it forward and giving back. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and your last name is Soares. So it's Soares, but spelled differently than people might think it is. So Soares. Jonathan Soares. You can definitely find him on LinkedIn, founder, CEO of Agency Labs. We'll also put a link in the show notes to your profile and to your company. Dude, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for sharing your perspective on this.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, for sure. We'll have to do it again soon. And thanks, man. We'll talk then. All right, folks. That is my conversation with Jonathan Soares. Thank you so much for listening to the Startup Selling Show. One of the things I wanted to do, and as we've seen readership, as we've seen the listenership grow, in addition to seeing the wonderful reviews that people have been leaving on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and Spotify and all the other places where we syndicate and send out this podcast for you to listen to it. The reviews are great. The viral stuff is great. But I've also noticed that, there's an opportunity that if you're listening to this podcast and you've got your own blog or you've got your own articles that you're writing, it's a great opportunity for you I would love to get your views on some of what we're sharing here on an episode. So if you've listened to this episode or other episodes, and, I'd love to get your perspective on that in a blog post or in an article and share this out to the rest of the world. So the reviews are great. We certainly appreciate that. Sharing, the news about this podcast with a friend or 10, viral is always the best podcast to grow. But if you are, if you're in sales or you've got some perspectives on stuff that we're sharing, I'd love to see it in an article. So please do write an article about it. If you're doing a podcast yourself, do a podcast about the podcast episode that we just talked about or the topics. And I'd love to get your views. As much as we're sharing information, I also want to create conversation in the marketplace, in our world of startups and selling. So that's it for now. That's the ask that I've got for you. Thanks so much for listening to the Startup Selling Show. Please do tell a friend or 10 about this, and please do leave a review if you haven't already on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify, any of the places where you might be checking out this podcast.
And looking forward to the next episode coming out next week. That's it for now. This is Scott Sambucci signing off.